What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro-Black Blurred Kingdom podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the arrest of Ryan Coogler. But on top of that issue, I'm going to be tying it into a couple other things that I think are closely related to what I'm speaking about. I'll be talking about the off-codeness that exists in the black community, what off-codeness, or what I like to call inappropriate behavior, looks like, and I want to talk a little bit about white supremacy in banks and also black women's role in everything that I'm saying. I want to read to you all an article that I had just had a chance to look over about a week ago or so that discussed the situation that happened with Ryan Coogler. And I want to give you all the story. And then I also want to talk a little bit about what I think about it and my interpretation of everything that I saw. The source that I am reading from is from Variety.com, an article that was made that details a conversation, I believe, or an interview that happened with Ryan Coogler prior to the incident that happened. The article is titled, Black Panther director Ryan Coogler was mistaken for a bank robber. Quotation marks. This situation should never have happened. Black Panther director Ryan Coogler was briefly detained by police in Atlanta in January after he was mistaken for a bank robber at a Bank of America, according to a police report filed on Wednesday. The director confirmed the incident to Variety. This situation should have never happened, he said. However, Bank of America worked with me and addressed it to my satisfaction, and we moved on. Coogler was detained and handcuffed after he went to Bank of America to make a transaction on January the 7th. According to the Atlanta police report, that is. The 35-year-old director, who was wearing a hat, sunglasses, and a COVID face mask, went to the counter and handed the bank teller a withdrawal slip with a note written on the back that reportedly read, I would like to withdraw $12,000 cash from my checking account. Please do the money count somewhere else. I'd like to be discreet, he said in quotations. The teller, however, misinterpreted the situation as an attempted robbery when the amount of the transaction exceeded $10,000 and triggered an alert notification from Coogler's bank account. The teller then informed her boss that she suspected it was a robbery attempt, and together they called the police. 4 Atlanta Police Department officers arrived at the scene and detained 2 of Coogler's colleagues who were waiting for him outside the bank in a car with the engine running. They informed the officers who Coogler was and what he was wearing, which matched the description of the man suspected of robbing the bank. Coogler's colleagues were detained in the back of a police vehicle, and Coogler was handcuffed and taken out of the bank by 2 of the officers. After verifying Coogler's identity and his Bank of America account, the officers released him and his colleagues. A Bank of America spokesperson told Variety, "We deeply regret that this incident occurred. It never should have happened, and we have apologized to Mr. Coogler." Coogler has been filming the sequel to the superhero tentpole Black Panther, Wakanda Forever in Atlanta. The film is set for release in November. Ever since the renewed Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis at the hands of police, there has been heightened scrutiny of incidents of racism across myriad industries and a laser focus on racism in Hollywood. The movement has also emboldened more black people and people of color, oh, here we go with this shit, in the industry to speak about their experiences, as discussed in a roundtable hosted by Variety. So, to summarize, this is what I got from it. So in Atlanta, Ryan Coogler, he went into this Bank of America, asked for $12,000, and there happened to be a black woman who was a teller who was helping him. He slipped her the note, asking her to be discreet and to count the money elsewhere. And then not too long after that, the police showed up, handcuffed him and had guns drawn. He was then escorted out of the bank, only to later find out that he was mistaken for a robber. So, here is the glaring problem that I noticed here. And this is a problem that I've noticed in every business industry that I can think of. There is far too much off-codeness, black off-codeness, when it comes to these types of situations. And this incident that happened with Ryan Coogler is living proof of how it happens. But before I go into what I mean by that, let me clarify what I believe off-codeness, or as I like to call it, inappropriate behavior, actually means. The problem with this term, speaking about off-codeness that is that it gets thrown around quite a bit. And there is little understanding on what that means. And the reason why I think it gets thrown around is because after a while it becomes very buzzy, like a buzzword. And unfortunately, I think that we have to find other words to use that mean the same thing or are synonyms of it. And I feel like inappropriate behavior is synonymous of off-codeness. A lot of you all, and I mean this with love, y'all, so I do not mean this like in a way that's going to be disrespectful. I just mean it because I think this is the thing that a lot of y'all need to realize and y'all need to really understand. And it's just a truth that nobody will say. A lot of you all in the black community, a lot of us black people, are more concerned about finding a way to survive, thrive, and find comfort in white supremacy than we are to find freedom in it. I'm going to repeat that. A lot of us in the black community are more concerned about looking for the ability to survive, thrive, and find comfort in white supremacy than we are to find freedom. What that means is that we would have to go through a process that takes a lot of sacrifice, and real freedom comes at the price of dismantling the system of oppression and all the things that come with it. And that's the thing that I think that a lot of black people are not willing to do. Being off code, or what I like to call inappropriate behavior, has a set of rules that if you break them, that you fall under the heading of being off code, or you fall under the heading of being inappropriate in your behavior. And these are guidelines that, if not followed, lead to having that type of description. Now, black people, here are the things that you should do in order to avoid being off code or exhibiting inappropriate behavior. I'm going to give you some very concrete rules and things that should be followed. Now, again, a lot of people, when they hear the term off code, or even if they hear me say inappropriate behavior, believe that it's subjective. This is the thing that I believe. This is the thing that is different from person to person, and so I'm only giving my beliefs. But there are very standard things that we as black people should not be doing all around the board, no matter how you try to swing off codeness. Number one, as a black person, you should not be killing your own people unwarranted. That's number one. Now, obviously, context is key here. There are certain situations where you got to be able to protect yourself if something is about to happen to you or your family, and that's totally understandable. We as black people should always have the right to protect ourselves from anyone, even those who have established themselves as our enemies. But killing your own people is a part of off-codeness. The second thing that's a part of off-codeness is stealing from your own people. That is something that you do not do. Do not steal from your own people. I don't recommend you steal from anybody because, let's be real, the price of stealing from someone, if you get caught, is not really worth it. Especially if it's like from like a white business or something like that. you shouldn't steal from anybody from that regard, but you definitely should not steal from your own people. Third, you should not be giving into the agendas of the white dominated power structure. That is a loaded one. That one is the most loaded on this list. And that's because there could be so many hidden things that a lot of you all don't even realize are agendas. And if you feed into it, you're feeding right into the off-codeness that I'm speaking about. The next thing, the fourth thing that contributes to off-codeness is investing in other communities before you do your own. This is a bad habit of our community because we typically try to do everything for other people other than ourselves. We cape for other people. We try to help other people. We try to be kind to other people. We try to forgive other people. But what do we do with our own communities? We criticize each other. We don't help each other. We spread individualistic values. So essentially, we don't do anything to promote the unity and the support of one another in the Black community. And nothing about our attitude, behavior, or the things that we do shows that either. Okay? The fifth thing to consider is, in off-codeness, is failing to protect your own in situations of danger or of integrity. So that's not in just situations where a Black person is about to get killed and there's that hope that you defend them in that situation. But there's also in situations of integrity. There's in situations of speaking up for our people. There's in situations of doing the right thing for our people in order to drive this narrative of being on code more. So if you're against that, then you are off code. Obviously, this can go more into depth and I can branch this out even further, but I didn't want to do an entire podcast episode on what it means to be off code or what it means to be on code or what it means to have appropriate behavior. I just wanted to give you all some examples. Now, last thing I want to say is a specific example of some of these little things that I see people do that are really off code, because when we're thinking about not giving into like certain agendas and things like that, I just want to give you a few to lead off on. That is voting without making or demanding tangibles. I was going to say making a demand for a tangible, but demanding tangibles. That's off code. Failing to protect our leaders who are committed to justice. That's off code. Helping or caping for other groups before your own. That is off code. The list goes on, but those are just a few things to consider. Now, as far as appropriate behavior, the reason why I started using that term again was that off code, or being on code, I guess, was buzzy sounding. So it sounded like a buzzword. But essentially, I actually got the term from Dr. Claude Anderson because he used it in one of his speeches when he was talking to his people about some of his beliefs on how we as Black people can achieve the empowerment that we deserve. Now, I want to be very honest with you. If you guys don't know who Claude Anderson is at this point, I would strongly advise you, and if you have kids, to get a very, very good understanding of who he is and what he has done, the contributions he has made to the Black community. If you all do not know who he is by now, I strongly suggest that you do that very, very soon. He made a lot of great books like Powernomics and things like that, and like Black Labor, White Wealth. I have a bunch of them like sitting on my shelf right now, and I read Powernomics, I read Black Labor, White Wealth, and there's a few other books that I have from him as well too. But anyway, I just wanted to make that note. Back to the thing about Ryan Coogler. So let's ask some crucial questions about the situation that happened. Number one, and these are things to consider to ask the Black woman teller who thought this was cool. Number one, why would a bank robber ask to withdraw money from his or her own account and also present his or her ID, in this case his? Number two, why would you not then thoroughly check the ID, or at least ask him to pull down his mask for verification if you were unsure that it was that same person? Number three, why would you then get the police there after saying, I think this is the bank robber. Ask the officer, and then the officer who arrested him, tell that officer, good job, as if you were happy that he got arrested. You know, and I need to say this after just making those points. And once again, I mean this with love. I really, really do. I don't mean this disrespectfully whatsoever. But I need to give some tough love to you sisters out there. Y'all need a little bit of tough love. And I'm going to give you some perspective that a lot of you all probably don't want to hear, but you're going to hear it from me. Some of you sisters get into these positions and y'all get way too comfortable with turning on black men. And a lot of times it's because the liberal dominant white society made you feel like you were the powerful face and future of blackness. You all have been, in their minds, like you have been manipulated by them to believe that you are going to be the future of the black culture. That without you all, it's going to be total, it's going to fail. And to some extent that's true. Without, like, we need you all. But you all been made to believe that without us it won't matter, because you all are the future of how good it will be. But let me be clear when I say this, because I believe that what happens to you all happens on both sides of the political spectrum. It happens on the liberal side and it happens on the conservative side. But I want to kind of explain a few examples of how it happens, from both, again, perspectives. On the liberal side, black women get told that they're strong, they're powerful, and in a way they get turned into these loud, abrasive, over-masculinized caricatures who are operating from what I believe to be a trauma response for the way that they have been manipulated. You all get into this feminism bullshit that has nothing to do with your culture, and you get separated from black men and adopt this mentality like you don't need us, when the reality is that we really need each other. Now, I want to give you all a specific example of where I have seen this off-codeness and almost this dismissive behavior that goes on from black women in these quote-unquote powerful positions, and how they treat black men because of what the white-dominated society has allowed them to believe and has allowed them to do. In the example of Black Lives Matter, and they mentioned this in that article, in the example of Black Lives Matter, think about the whole concept. It was quote-unquote founded by 3 black women who are the faces of the movement, almost like Ronald McDonald. And that's kind of ironic because they're clowns. But they sit up there, and even in interviews, they champion for every specific group of blacks. They champion for blacks in the LGBT community. They champion for black women. They champion for people of color. Yet they don't say a word about black men specifically. Hell, if you look on the website and you read the description, the foundation of the organization was built upon the idea or the Trayvon Martin situation. And if you think about that, Trayvon Martin was a black boy. Also consider the idea that black men, like the term, like the categorization of black men, since they were left off this list, it ignores the issue of how people like Trayvon Martin, who fit his archetype being a black male, are also being left in the dust by that specific title not even being in the description. Also consider all of the issues that black men face that are unique to what happens in our world. We have some of the worst things happen to black men than any other specific group that exists. We have the highest suicide rate in America amongst every specific group. And that's, like I said, like that's sex included because we're black men. We are murdered unjustly the most at the hands of white supremacist officers. And we are the most hated in society in general. Not to mention, we have the most proof of our bloodshed. Like, think about it. We have Trayvon Martin. We have Tamir Rice, right? We have Alton Sterling. We have Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Mike Brown, Philando Castile, Amir Locke. I could keep going. I'm just naming a good handful of names so you all get the picture of what I'm saying, because there's a lot more black men than the ones I just named. A lot more. And yet and still, we are treated like an afterthought, even in a movement that is supposedly going to champion for us. Mind you, all of these people were heterosexual black men as well too, as far as what I've seen. They spent time sectioning off these other all these like specific groups as if to advocate specifically for them. And we are literally, our specific group is left off of the description page, the about page in their movement. Now, at some point they do say all black people, but they took the time to specifically point out the groups that they help and that they serve, and our group was not in there. Black men, like heterosexual black men or just black men in general, was not in there, but all these other groups were there. They made it a point to make all these marginalized groups and left us off. Mind you, they are majorly funded by this rich white man named George Soros. I know you all heard about him. One of the women who was on there, actually, now that I think about it, Alicia Garza, she even stepped down prior to this big uproar about where the money went and all this other stuff. Hell, they've even faced a lot of scrutiny because two of like the families of some of the black males who got killed on some white supremacist shit have even spoken out against the movement. Anyway, I could go on a tirade and talk about Black Lives Matter and my issues with them all day, but that's another episode for another day, let's be honest. But I wanted to just show you all a prime example of what it looks like from the liberal side and how we get into these movements and spaces and or black women get into these movements and spaces and they don't champion for black men in the way that they could. From the conservative side, you get the Candace Owenses of the world. Candace Owens makes it a point to denigrate all black people at every turn, all for the sakes of being the black face for the white supremacist conservative talking points. She gives them justification to do a lot of the insanity that they choose to do. They start doing whatever the white supremacist says, people like Candace Owens, and getting paid for it like it's a hustle. And don't get me wrong, Democrats do that too. They're basically shields for whatever that white political group is. But the swagger is just a little different. And to be honest, there's a lot of things that can be a factor in that too. Some of these black women are off code because they are black immigrants who aren't from here but have a lot of contempt for black Americans. Some are just black women who've been influenced by feminism. Some are in echo chamber for their bitter friends. It really kind of just depends. But regardless, I just wanted to be able to show you all the difference between those two. I spent more time breaking down the liberal example because the conservative example is in your face. When you see Candace Owens, there's basically no denying how direct her anti-blackness is and how willing she is to make these anti-black statements. Now, as far as the liberal side, it's not so cut and dry. So I felt the need to break that down a little more. So recently I had a conversation on Instagram, and it was with this sister who commented. She's one of my followers. We had like a pretty decent dialogue here, but basically she made a point and she said that the media has put out a lot of attention on the black teller in this Ryan Coogler situation. And she said we need to think about whether or not the managers are black and if the verification policies that they implemented at the bank are things that have been checked over, because the same thing that happened in the Ryan Coogler situation also happened at a Chase bank that was in Houston. And I get what she was trying to say, but here was my explanation to her. I explained that this was really the sheer work of Off-Codeness, y'all. This was the sheer work of Off-Codeness from brothers and sisters in this specific case. No one told that black woman to carry out those policies. She could have bowed out gracefully and quit and said she wasn't going to be a part of this arrest. But let's be real. You know that she wanted to keep her damn job. When you know how people are, with that they need their money, they're going to keep their job, and if they gotta just sacrifice somebody in the process, they'll just do it. And that's what that sister did. Hell, even if it was a black manager who told her to do that, my statement would still stand about off-codeness and how it still applies to this specific situation. You're off-code in these situations when you're willing to turn on your own people or watch something happen to them for the sake of a check. Also, even if you are hearing me and you are shrugging, no one told that black women, no one told that black woman to tell the police officer good job when he arrested Ryan Coogler. No one told her to do that. No black manager said, after you are done, go to this black police officer who was arresting this black man and say, good job, I'm glad that you caught that nigga. Nobody championed that to her. She chose to do that. She had glee in the idea that he was getting taken away. She had glee. That's a problem. So yes, that sister does need to be held accountable. Because at the end of the day, had she not tried to call that sudden audible, then that would have never happened. He could have lost his life, y'all. Ryan Coogler could have lost his life, regardless of what the bank's policies were. And I'm not saying that the bank's policies have not been anti-black, and we'll get into that in a minute. I'm just saying that off-codeness could have prevented her at least from taking part in what they were trying to do to this brother. That's all I'm trying to say. She was just a little too eager for me, especially to have that man arrested. And you have to wonder where that type of mentality would even come from. If you ask me, she and that black police officer who did what they did, they both deserve that smoke. And y'all know it. They both deserve that smoke. Now, let's talk about banks and anti-blackness, since we kind of covered all of the basis of anti-blackness and off-codeness from, our brothers and sisters. But anyway, at this point, I don't really need to make the point that there's anti-blackness in a lot of large white corporations in general. But a lot of people don't realize that there are a lot of ties to slavery in these big bank institutions. As a matter of fact, Bank America and Chase, ironically, as this follower of mine on Instagram mentioned, are both banks that have ties to slavery, as a matter of fact. A lot of people don't even know that the game Monopoly that people play, that's kind of like a low-key real estate game. The little Monopoly guy that is supposed to be the mascot for the game was made in the image of J.P. Morgan Chase. He was a man who was all about money, and slaves were his original product. Chase, I guess, made a so-called public apology for the slavery thing a while ago, but let's think about this. How much money did they pay out in reparations for the black slaves that they own? Not a damn dime. As a matter of fact, they still are out here gouging people who bank with them. Bank of America also owned slaves. And that tells you the history of what these banking institutions have done, against black people. I made this point to say black people have to stop thinking about these institutions that need to be transformed into something that's more inclusive, quote unquote. We need to have more real talk about how we can make our own institutions and eliminate some of these things that have happened to our people who do business with people who hate us and kill us. To me, all of this is no different than looking at a child who touched a hot stove after you told them not to. How many times have you seen something in the news randomly saying a random black person got killed and they were just doing something as simple as sleeping in their home? Okay? Many times, right? It doesn't matter what race you are at this point. Many times you've heard that. So I asked this question to black people. How many more innocent black people have to get killed at the hands of white supremacy before you realize that we are at war? Do I need to list off the names again and more names for y'all to realize that this is not about individual bad and good people? This is low-key genocide to black people? We are at war, y'all. This is not a game. And by doing some of the things that black folks like her, like the teller, and like that officer were doing in that bank, they are assistants in getting us killed. And this is what I mean when I say the off-codeness and the coonery are at an all-time high. And you know, I gotta apologize a little bit because I'm kind of getting beside myself, because that just frustrates me when I see that. But yeah, these anti-black agendas are everywhere though. And even from my end, I see that a lot in the creative space that I speak about. This type of thing shows up very often. In comic media, whenever I point out the ways our people get mistreated, even if it's real subtle, even if it's a real small example, there will always be some Negro that will come behind me and start psychoanalyzing what I said way beyond the point that I just made. And they'll start babbling and shit and just say, and say something as a contradiction or just to be contrary to what the point I was trying to make. And the reason why they do that is because they're too afraid to call it out their damn selves. They're too afraid to call out when they see anti-blackness. So they have tried to find a way to just ignore that it's happening, like they can actually do that. A lot of y'all will have these dissertions and theories as if to assume that I'm reaching, and some of the connections that I made had just happened to be coincidences and I'm just going too far. There is a reason why white comic media doesn't make that many original black characters. There's a reason why dark-skinned black women are portrayed as masculine or gay. There's a reason that black characters are turned into tech nerds or sidekicks to the main heroes and they don't have any powers. There's a reason that we never see functional relationships between black men and black women. It is not me being paranoid. It's you off-code Negroes out there taking anything that's given to you. Y'all should know by now, there are no coincidences when it comes to anti-blackness. It is orchestrated and it is purposeful. The point that I'm trying to make with all this is that this brother could have lost his life, and it would have been the fault of sheer coonery from the teller and the officer. And let's be real, y'all. That officer was most likely in that police station keying and splaining with the white supremacists. He probably does that on a regular basis. He probably sees all types of shit going all the time. He's probably out there just splaining and talking about how, you know, there's got to be order and, you know, and trying to say, and he's probably a pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of dude. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be doing what he's doing. He wouldn't even done what he did when he was in the bank with Ryan Coogler. This situation, this whole thing, was just proof of how that type of behavior and that lack of a code of ethics is going to be another downfall of our community. Moral of the story, y'all: all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Anyway, y'all, I'm going to end right there. I just wanted to give you all that little story, and I wanted to give my thoughts on the subject matter, and I wanted to kind of break it down so you can understand where I'm coming from. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you continue to watch more. Feel free to catch me on here and several other platforms. I'm on Google Podcasts. I'm on Player FM. I'm still trying to get my Apple podcast thing up, but that'll be coming pretty soon. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy this episode once again, and I will be talking to y'all soon. Peace.